Rain slammed against the windshield like an unrelenting drumbeat, drowning out the silence that had settled inside Avery like a second skin. Her wipers struggled to keep up as she drove deeper into the Appalachian backroads, the edges of the narrow highway blurred with fog. Her phone buzzed weakly on the passenger seat. No signal, of course. Not this deep into the mountains. She hadn't seen another car for over an hour. She wasn't supposed to come back to Black Hollow. Not after what happened 10 years ago. Not after the night she still couldn't remember, the night her mother died and her sister refused to talk about. But Avery came anyway. Not because she was brave. Because she had nothing left to lose. 3 months ago, her sister, Jo, had gone missing. Disappeared from her tiny cabin near Black Hollow's edge without a word. No sign of forced entry. No evidence of foul play. Just her boots by the door. And her journal left open on the kitchen counter. That was the last thing anyone ever saw of her. Avery had begged the sheriff's office to look deeper, but they dismissed Jo as a runaway or someone who didn't want to be found. Typical. That small town silence, that secret keeping quiet that clung to Black Hollow like moss. No one ever wanted to ask the real questions around here, but Avery had questions, and she was going to get answers. Her fingers tightened around the wheel. The ghost of Jo's voice playing again in her mind. Don't come back to Black Hollow, Avery. It's not safe. He's out. Who was he? Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the skeletal trees flanking the road. The rain picked up, and suddenly the forest felt alive, shifting, breathing, watching. The further she drove, the more it felt like something unseen traveled alongside her in the mist. Then she saw it. A shadow darted across the road, huge, fast, a blur of black fur and limbs. She gasped, slamming the brakes. The car swerved wildly, tires shrieking on slick pavement. Avery screamed as her SUV skidded sideways and crashed into a muddy ditch. The world jolted sideways. The impact knocked her head hard against the window, dazing her. Silence, only the pounding of her heart. She groaned and blinked through the fog clouding her vision. The engine had gone quiet. The headlights flickered but stayed on, casting two eerie beams through the curtain of rain. Something moved just beyond them. Avery slowly pushed the door open, her limbs trembling. The rain soaked her instantly as she stepped into the cold night air. Mud clung to her boots. Her breath puffed out. In pale clouds, she turned toward the road and froze. A massive wolf stood 20 feet away, not just big and natural. Its coat was blacker than the night itself, thick and sleek with rain. Golden eyes locked onto hers, sharp and intelligent. Its chest rose and fell steadily. But it didn't growl, didn't bare its teeth. It just watched her. Every hair on Avery's body stood on end. She didn't know why she didn't run. Her instincts screamed to get back in the car, but something deeper, a strange pull in her chest, held her still. The wolf took one step forward. She gasped. It wasn't fear. It was familiarity. An inexplicable recognition flared inside her, like a long-forgotten dream stirred awake. You, she whispered, barely audible over the rain. You were watching me. The wolf tilted its head slightly. The gesture was too human. Suddenly, she remembered the last entry in Jo's journal, the one circled 3 times in red ink. He's not just a man. He's the reason the forest listens at night. The wolf blinked slowly, almost as if acknowledging her thoughts. Avery's mind swam. Her head throbbed. What was this? A wild animal? A hallucination? Something else entirely? Are you him? She asked, voice quivering. The wolf didn't answer, of course, but its body language shifted, muscles tense, not in aggression, but readiness. Then it turned, disappearing into the trees with unnerving silence, its massive form swallowed whole by the mist. Avery stood alone on the road, rain dripping down her face, her breath ragged. This wasn't just wildlife, and she knew it. She stumbled back to the SUV, grabbing Jo's journal from the passenger seat and flipping through soaked pages. With trembling hands, symbols, scrawled maps, notes about the full moon, soul bond rituals, old mountain curses. She'd thought Jo had gone crazy, obsessed with the supernatural, with stories their grandmother used to whisper before bed about wolves that could walk like men, and men who could love you so fiercely they'd burn down the forest to keep you. But what if they weren't just stories? What if Black Hollow had always been more than a town? Avery clutched the journal to her chest. The pain in her temple pulsed. She was cold, soaked to the bone, and more alone than ever. But something inside her, a part that had been numb for years, was awakening. That wolf had looked at her like it knew her, and stranger still, she felt like she knew it too. Somewhere in the forest, something waited, a truth hidden beneath roots and shadows. A force older than the town, than the people who tried to forget, and it had just revealed itself to her. Unlikely meeting. The next morning, Avery awoke to the sound of birdsong and the unfamiliar creak of old wooden beams above her. For a terrifying moment, she didn't know where she was. Then she sat up too fast and regretted it. A sharp pain sliced through her temple. She groaned, pressing her palm against the throbbing spot where her head had hit the window. Everything came rushing back. The storm. The crash, the wolf. Her eyes scanned the room. A small, rustic cabin. The walls were rough-hewn logs, the scent of pine and firewood thick in the air. A cast-iron stove radiated heat in the corner. Her soaked clothes had been replaced with a flannel shirt and joggers clearly not hers. Panic rose in her chest. Who brought her here? Who changed her? Then the door creaked. She turned sharply and saw him. A man stepped inside, tall and broad-shouldered, his movements quiet but powerful. Raven black hair fell to his jaw, damp and tousled from the morning mist. His eyes, those golden eyes, froze. Her breath, she knew them. They were the wolf's. He paused when he saw her awake. Tension crackled in the air between them. His jaw was tight, his expression unreadable. "You're awake," he said, voice low and deep, tinged with something wild. "You hit your head. I brought you here before the cold could get worse." "You," she whispered, still trying to wrap her head around the connection. "You were the wolf. Last night, I saw you." His eyes narrowed, but he didn't deny it. "You shouldn't have been out there alone. Not this deep. Not during a storm. You followed me. I protected you." There was no emotion in his tone, no warmth, no apology. But there was something behind his eyes. Something caged. Avery's breath caught in her throat. "Why?" He turned away and began stoking the fire. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." His shoulders stiffened, but he said nothing. The silence stretched. She glanced toward the door, then down at the journal clutched in her lap. Joe's journal. Somehow, it had ended up beside her in the cabin. Her heart squeezed. "My sister," she said suddenly, cutting through the heavy quiet. "She disappeared 3 months ago, right around this area. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" His back was still to her, but she didn't miss the way his hand paused mid-motion. "I don't know her," he said finally. "You hesitated." "I don't answer to suspicion, human." Avery stood despite the ache in her limbs. "Then tell me your name. If I'm going to be trapped in a cabin with a shape-shifting wolf who undressed me while I was unconscious, the least you could do is introduce yourself." He turned slowly, his golden gaze fixed on her like a flame too hot to look into. "I didn't undress you. I had help from a woman in the village." "You were freezing." "Name," she demanded again, heart pounding. A pause. Then, "Kale." She didn't know what she expected. Something more monstrous, maybe. But Kale sounded like someone caught between two worlds, just like he seemed to be. "I'm Avery," she offered, more softly now. "I know." Her brow furrowed. "You've been watching me?" He gave a faint nod, as if confessing something shameful. "Since the moment you stepped back into Black Hollow." "Why?" Kale hesitated. "Because you're not just a visitor here. You've always belonged to this place. Even if you don't remember." She shivered, not from cold, but from something deeper. A memory she couldn't quite catch. "What is this place?" Kale's gaze burned with restrained fury. "A cursed land. A place where fate tightens its grip around people like us." He stepped closer, his voice dropping into something darker. "And fate is watching you, Avery, closely." She backed away instinctively, bumping against the edge of the old wooden table. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Kale murmured, "that the wolf you saw last night wasn't the first you'll see. And if you're not careful, you won't make it out of this forest again." A cold dread trickled down her spine. "You know what happened to my sister, don't you?" His expression softened just barely. "I know something took her. Something old. Something my kind has tried to keep buried. Then help me find her." Kale's jaw flexed, torn. "If I help you, if I show you what lives in these woods, you won't be able to return to your old life. Everything changes once you cross the veil." "I already crossed it the moment I saw you shift," she whispered. The room filled with the quiet crackle of fire and the pounding of Avery's heart. Kale studied her, something unreadable in his gaze, wariness, pain, perhaps even regret. Then, finally, he said, "Get some rest. Tonight, we begin." She didn't know what that meant, But she knew one thing with absolute certainty: whatever she had stepped into last night wasn't just danger, it was destiny. And Kale, the stranger wolf with fire in his eyes and shadows in his voice, was at the heart of it. Suspicion and curiosity. Ivory tried to sleep, but the creaking wood and distant howls outside the cabin refused to let her mind rest. Shadows danced on the walls from the flickering fire, and Kale's words echoed in her skull. Everything changes once you cross the veil. She kept Joe's journal on her chest like a shield, her fingers curled tightly around the worn leather edges. Every muscle in her body wanted to believe this was just trauma, exhaustion, and a bump on the head. But deep down, her soul buzzed with something she hadn't felt since childhood: a pull, a knowing. Something ancient was in those woods, and Kale, he wasn't just a man with a secret, he was the key to all of it. By morning, the cabin was empty. Kale was gone. Avery slipped from under the blankets, instantly shivering in the mountain chill. She dressed in her damp clothes, boots included, and stepped outside. She froze. A line of fresh paw prints led from the cabin toward the tree's massive lupine prints that couldn't belong to any ordinary wolf. Her breath puffed into fog as she knelt to inspect them, fingers brushing the frost-edged soil. They were too close to the cabin, too deliberate. He wanted her to see them. A part of her told her to run, to hike back to her car if it hadn't been destroyed, and call someone, anyone. But that part of her was drowned out by a louder, deeper instinct, the same one that made her open Joe's journal again and again, the same one that had drawn her to Black Hollow when she should have stayed far away. So she followed the tracks. The forest stretched around her like a cathedral, towering pines, heavy moss, light dappled through shifting clouds. The air buzzed with a silence too perfect to tense. She moved carefully, eyes alert, each footstep measured. After what felt like an hour, she found him. Kale stood on a cliff edge, shirtless, chest rising with slow, steady breaths. The wind swept through his dark hair, and his skin glowed faintly under the filtered sun. Scars slashed across his back, old ones, jagged and angry, like claw marks or something worse. He didn't turn when she approached. "You followed me, you left tracks." "I meant to." "Why?" "To see if you'd listen to your fear, or your curiosity." Avery crossed her arms, keeping her distance. "I haven't decided if that was brave or stupid yet." A half smile tugged at his lips. "Bravery and stupidity are often cousins." She stared at the marks on his back. "What did that to you?" Kale turned slightly, his golden eyes shadowed. "Not what? Who?" Avery hesitated. "Were they part of your pack?" He went still. "I don't have a pack," he said quietly. "Not anymore." That answer was heavy with sorrow and warning. Avery stepped closer, ignoring the tightening in her chest. "Kale, last night, you said something took Joe. Something old. Is it still out there?" His eyes narrowed. "You ask a lot of questions for someone who doesn't understand the danger. Then help me understand." He looked away, jaw tight. "Some truths don't set you free. They bind you tighter." "I don't care. I need to know what's happening here. What happened to my sister?" Kale studied her. His silence was long, unreadable. Then finally he said, "There's a place. An old stone circle. If Joe was taken, she might have been led there. Then take me to it." "No." His voice was firm. "Not yet. You're not ready." "Why?" "Because I'm human. Because you still think this world plays by your rules." Avery's pulse pounded. "I saw you shift. I watched you walk through a storm as a wolf and carry me back to safety. That's not human. And I didn't run then, because you didn't know what it meant." Kale stepped closer. His presence was overwhelming, warm, wild, and coiled like a spring beneath calm skin. "There are rules you don't see, Avery. Curses passed down through bloodlines. Old magic that lingers in these woods. If I take you to the stone circle now, you won't walk out." She didn't look away. "Then tell me what you're not saying. Tell me why you really saved me." Kale's throat worked. His gaze fell too. Her hands, one still holding Joe's journal. His voice softened. "You're not the first hollow to come looking for answers." She blinked. "You know my family? I knew your grandmother. She used to bring wildflowers to the creek. Said they kept the spirits calm." A chill rippled through her. "My grandmother died when I was 10, and even now, the trees remember her." His words were strange, dreamlike, but the way he said them, Avery felt her breath catch. "What? Are you Kale?" He looked at her with something between regret and warning, something that shouldn't exist anymore. Avery opened Joe's journal again, flipping to the page with the burned edges, the one she'd barely dared to read before. Her sister's handwriting trembled at the bottom. I saw them. They aren't just wolves. They wear our faces. One of them smiled at me. She looked up at him. Was it you she saw? His jaw clenched. I tried to protect her, but someone else found her first. Who? Kale turned away again. A former alpha. One who believes humans have no place here. Avery stepped forward, her heart roaring. Then help me stop him. I can't. Why not? He turned then, fire lighting in his eyes. Because if I shift again without a pack to tether me, I won't come back. I'll lose what's left of me. Her breath faltered. That's what being a rogue does. You run too long, you become the beast. Silence pressed between them, fragile and painful. Avery didn't know what possessed her, maybe the raw truth in his voice, or the quiet tremble beneath his strength, but she reached out and touched his hand. Kale flinched, but didn't pull away. You're not alone anymore, she whispered. And you're not lost. He stared at her, something ancient and wounded breaking through the gold of his eyes. You don't know what I've done, he said. I don't care. You saved me. That counts. Kale exhaled slowly. His fingers curled around hers just briefly. Then promise me you won't leave the cabin tonight. I can't promise that. Avery, you said fate is watching me. Maybe it brought me here for a reason. He shook his head. Or maybe it brought you here to die. Their eyes locked. The wind stirred the pines around them. Somewhere in the distance, a howl rose, not Kale's, but something sharper, hungrier. He stiffened. They're coming, he said. Who? The ones who think your blood shouldn't mix with ours. Avery's blood turned to ice. Kale grasped her wrist, firm but not rough. Go back. Stay low. Lock the door. Don't open it unless you hear me say your name. But go. His voice was full alpha, now commanding, protective, and terrifying. She ran. Back in the cabin, Avery bolted the door and sat with her back pressed to the wall, heart pounding, eyes on the window. Outside, the trees bent in the wind, and shadows moved unnaturally fast between the branches. Something was out there, something that wanted her gone. She thought about Kale alone, broken, facing monsters like himself. And still, he'd protected her. Even when he had every reason not to. As darkness fell and the howls grew closer, Avery clutched the journal and whispered to herself, I'm not leaving. Not without answers. Not without him. Building trusty fire in the cabin had died down to embers, and Avery hadn't dared to sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind that swept against the walls made her heart race. The storm outside had calmed, but the storm inside her only worsened. She sat cross-legged on the floor, Joe's journal open in her lap, Kale's warning replaying again and again in her mind. Don't open the door unless you hear me say your name. But what if he didn't come back? What if those howls had swallowed him whole? Just as panic threatened to strangle her, a soft knock echoed through the door, barely audible. She jumped to her feet, heart hammering. Silence followed. Then, a low voice, Avery. She froze. Say it again, she whispered, her palm pressed flat against the door. A pause. Then, with more certainty, Avery, hollow. Let me in. She unbolted the door in a rush and swung it open. Kale stood there, blood streaking down his temple, his shirt torn at the shoulder, chest rising with labored breaths. His eyes still burned faintly gold, not fully returned to human, but he was alive. Without thinking, Avery threw her arms around him. Kale tensed. For a heartbeat, he stood stiff and shocked, like no one had touched him like that in years. Then he slowly wrapped his arms around her in return, burying his face in her shoulder. I thought I lost you, she whispered, voice cracking. I told you to stay hidden. I did, but I couldn't breathe until I knew you were okay. He pulled back just enough to look at her. You're trembling. So are you. They stood in the doorway, two broken pieces trying to fit together, neither quite whole, but not entirely alone anymore. Inside, Avery helped clean the gash on his head. She worked in silence, hands gentle, trying to ignore how close he was, how his warmth brushed against her every time he moved, how his breathing slowed when she touched his skin. You don't have to be careful, Kale murmured. She paused. You're bleeding. I think I do. No, he said softly. I mean, with me, I won't hurt you. She met his eyes. But you're still afraid you will. He didn't deny it. Instead, he said, I've seen what I become when I lose control. It's why I live alone, why I don't stay in one place. But you came back for me. Kale's jaw flexed. Because something in me wouldn't let you go, even when it should have. She placed a bandage over his wound and sat back. That's not something to fear, Kale. That's something to trust. A silence fell, thick with the weight of unspoken things. Kale finally sat against the wall, stretching his legs out with a wince. They weren't just here for you. They were testing me. Who were they? He hesitated. My brother's old lieutenants. He was Alpha before he was killed. They think I should claim the title. I refused. Why? Because I don't want to be like him. Kale's voice was low. He ruled with fear, with rage. He believed humans were beneath us. Avery frowned. But you don't? I think fate doesn't waste its time on bloodlines. It chooses people for reasons we don't understand. People like you. The firelight flickered between them. Shadows danced on his face, highlighting the tired ache in his eyes. Avery reached for Joe's journal again. She came here thinking it would save her, Avery said. But I think it broke her. She saw something she couldn't explain. Something that made her leave me behind. She loved you, Kale said without hesitation. How do you know? Because you came after her. And only someone raised in love would be that reckless. Avery's throat tightened. I used to think she abandoned me, that I wasn't enough to make her stay. Kale studied her for a long time. Then slowly, he pulled a small object from the satchel at his side. A necklace. Avery gasped. It was Joe's. She'd recognize it anywhere. A silver crescent moon pendant on a frayed leather string. I found it near the edge of the stone circle 2 years ago, Kale said. I kept it, hoping one day I could give it to her. But maybe it's meant for you now. Avery took it with shaking hands. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Because I didn't want to give you false hope. That circle is a cursed place. Some who go in never return. But you think she's still alive? He nodded slowly. I felt her presence there. The forest remembers her. Tears welled in Avery's eyes. Then I have to go. You can't. Not alone. Then come with me. Kale stiffened. Avery, you just said fate chooses people for a reason. Maybe it brought me here to finish what Joe started. But I won't do it without you. The fire crackled between them. Kale's gaze dropped to her hand, the one still holding Joe's necklace, and then to her eyes. I don't know if I can protect you from what's coming. Then teach me how to protect myself. His brow furrowed. You're not like us. You won't heal like we do. Then I'll bleed. But I won't run. Kale stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You remind me of her, your sister, but you're not following in her footsteps. No? He shook his head. You're walking your own path, straight into the heart of the storm. Avery reached out, fingers brushing his. Then walk with me. He didn't answer. But he didn't pull away either, and for the first time since arriving in Black Hollow, Avery felt like she wasn't searching in the dark alone anymore. Dangerous obstacles. The morning after Kale returned, the forest seemed quieter but not safer. Avery stood outside the cabin, the damp earth soft beneath her boots. Mist clung low to the ground, curling like fingers between tree roots. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called sharply, and the cry echoed with an eerie finality. Kale emerged behind her, now wearing a dark hoodie and gloves, though the wound at his temple was still raw. They'll come again, he said simply. Scanning the trees like a soldier on the edge of enemy lines, Avery nodded, arms folded tightly over her chest. The ones from last night? Kale didn't answer right away. Not just them. Word travels fast in the packs, especially when it's about me. She turned toward him. Because you walked away from their leadership? Because I'm different, he muttered. And they don't like different. Avery studied him, the shadows under his eyes, the stiffness in his movements. There was more to his story. Layers he hadn't peeled back yet, but something had changed since last night. He no longer pushed her away. He stood closer now. His silence didn't feel like distance anymore. It felt like protection. I want to see the stone circle, she said suddenly. Kale turned to her, face unreadable. It's not just a place. It's alive, in ways you wouldn't believe. You go near it, it takes something from you. Then it's already taken something from me, she whispered. My sister. Kale's jaw clenched. We'll go. But first, we need to prepare. By midday, they were miles from the cabin, navigating a narrow trail that twisted through the dense underbrush. The deeper they went, the colder it became, though the sun remained overhead. It was as if the trees were holding their breath. What happens if someone from another pack finds us? Avery asked, stepping carefully over a tangle of roots. Kale gave her a sidelong glance. Depends on who it is. Some follow rules, others follow bloodlust. Great. They pressed on, the tension between them building not from mistrust, but from the weight of what lay ahead. Kale had explained little about the politics of the shifter world. What she gathered was this: packs operated under ancient law, and Kale had broken it. By choosing not to fight for the alpha position, he'd made himself a target, a rogue, a symbol of defiance, and by staying near him, Avery was now marked too. They were halfway down a ridge when Kale suddenly stopped, his body going rigid. "What is it?" Avery whispered. He held up a hand, nose tilted slightly upward. "Blood," he said. Before she could react, Kale grabbed her arm and yanked her behind a tree. Footsteps, snapping twigs, breathing. More than one. Avery dared a peek. 3 figures emerged from the trees, 2 men and a woman, all in worn clothes with silver blades strapped to their thighs. Their eyes gleamed gold, and they moved with a silent, terrifying grace. "Shifters, they're not from my brother's pack," Kale murmured. "These are bounty hunters." Avery's stomach dropped. "They're after you?" "Maybe." He turned, his eyes hardening. "Or you." The tallest of the hunters, a man with a burn scar down his jaw, paused in the clearing and sniffed the air. "She was here," he growled. "The human girl." Avery's blood turned to ice. Kale pushed her deeper into the shadows. "Run when I say," he said quietly. "Head back to the ridge and don't stop. But trust me." She didn't want to, not when fear clawed at her chest, not when the hunters moved closer. But she nodded. Kale stepped out from cover, his voice cool and sharp. "You're a long way from your territory." The hunters turned fast, instantly alert. Well, said the woman, stepping forward. "The killer prince himself, Kale of the cursed blood." Kale didn't flinch. "And who sent you?" "Callum's pack," she answered, grinning. "They want the human alive." For questioning. "I won't let you touch her." The scarred man chuckled. "Funny, that's what your brother said before we gutted him." Kale lunged. He shifted midair, bones cracking and reforming with sickening speed. His clothes shredded away, replaced by thick black fur and massive claws. He hit the hunter like a freight train, knocking him back with a growl that shook the trees. Avery didn't wait. She ran. The forest blurred around her as branches whipped at her face. She stumbled down the ridge, heart slamming in her chest. Behind her, the sounds of a brutal fight, snarls, screams, the clash of steel echoed through the valley. She kept running until her legs gave out, then silence. Too sudden, too wrong. She turned back toward the path, dread creeping in, and then Kale appeared, limping, blood trailing down his side, a wildfire still in his eyes. "They're gone," he said, voice hoarse. "But more will come." She ran to him, catching him before he collapsed. "I told you to run," he groaned, "and I did. I ran right into a tree." A weak chuckle escaped him, then a wince. "You're hurt. It'll heal," he muttered. "Just need a minute." Avery looked around. They were too exposed. "We can't stay here." "No, we go to the ruins. No one dares follow into the circle." "But you said." "I know what I said. But whatever is in there, it's better." "Then what's hunting us now?" He pushed himself up, leaning heavily on her shoulder. The connection between them burned stronger with every step. And though she feared what waited in the ruins, Avery knew this. The real danger wasn't the monsters in the woods. It was the truth they were about to uncover. Together, the secret unveiled. The ruins were nothing like Avery expected. The trees parted abruptly, revealing a circular clearing bathed in strange silver light despite the thick clouds overhead. Moss-covered stones jutted from the earth in jagged arcs, encircling a crumbled altar at the center. Vines crawled over ancient carvings, some of them glowing faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the pounding in her chest. She shivered. Kale leaned against her, still weak but standing. His skin was clammy, his breath shallow, blood soaked through his shirt, dark and fresh. "This place," he murmured, his voice thinner now. "It was once sacred." Before everything burned, Avery helped him toward the altar. The moment they crossed the invisible boundary of the stone circle, the forest fell silent. No birds, no wind. Even the cold changed, becoming heavier, older, like a weight of forgotten time pressing against her ribs. "Kale," she whispered, hesitant. "What is this place really?" He didn't answer at first. Instead, he sank down onto the edge of the altar stone, his face pale. "You were never supposed to find this. No outsider was. But I can't keep hiding it anymore. You need to know." She crouched beside him. "Know what?" He looked at her, his eyes glowing faintly in the strange light. "The truth about me. About why the others want me dead. About why you were marked. The moment we met, Avery felt the hairs on her arms rise. I don't understand. I'm just human. You're a shifter. That's it, right? He exhaled shakily. It's more than that. I wasn't just born into the pack, I was born cursed. He gestured toward the runes etched into the altar. My bloodline was tainted generations ago by an ancient bond gone wrong. Aluna betrayed her fated mate for a dark force promising eternal life. When the curse was broken, it didn't disappear, it latched onto her descendants. Kale pressed a hand to his chest. That's why my wolf is different, stronger, but unstable. That's why my pack feared me, why they branded me a threat. Avery's breath caught. And you didn't fight it? I tried, he said, looking away. But every time I shift, I feel it, the curse pulling at me, whispering, if I lose control during a full moon. His jaw clenched. I become something worse than a beast. Silence stretched between them. Then Avery asked the question clawing at her heart. What does this have to do with me? Kale met her gaze. Because your blood resonates with mine. You weren't supposed to cross into our territory, but when you did, when I found you in the woods, I realized something impossible. He reached into the pouch hanging from his belt and pulled out a sliver of a broken charm, etched with a glowing rune. He placed it in her hand. It was warm, strangely alive. That belonged to your sister, he said softly. She came here months ago, looking for something, or someone, and she found this place. Avery's fingers trembled. You saw her? I didn't know who she was at the time, Kale admitted. She ran when she saw me shift, but I followed her scent. It led to the stone circle. That night, the circle pulled her in. She wasn't taken, she offered herself. Avery's heart cracked open. What are you saying? She was looking for you, Kale whispered. She knew something was coming for you, something that only this place could stop. Tears burned in Avery's eyes. And what happened to her? Kale's voice broke. The circle doesn't kill, it transforms. It reshapes fate, but there's always a cost. She became part of it, one with the magic. That's why it called to you the night you arrived. That's why I couldn't ignore the pull either. She rose to her feet, backing away from him. So you knew she was gone, that I'd be next. And you didn't tell me. I was trying to protect you. No, Avery said, her voice sharp. You were trying to protect yourself. From guilt, from pain. You let me believe I was losing my mind. Kale stood, staggering slightly. If I'd told you the truth from the start, you would have run. Maybe I should have. His eyes darkened. You don't understand what's coming. The curse inside me isn't just growing, it's waking. And the packs know it. They want to use you to control me. They think your blood, your connection to this circle can bind me, make me a weapon. Avery stared at him, the pieces clicking together. That's why they're after me. Kale nodded. You're not just a human, Avery. You're something more now. You've touched the circle. It's in you. Avery pressed a hand to her chest, remembering the strange warmth she felt the night she first dreamed of this place. The night her skin glowed in the moonlight. The day she saw her sister vanish in the mist. I can feel it, she whispered. Like something's changing. Kale stepped toward her. You're evolving. The magic in this circle doesn't choose lightly. And it doesn't let go. She closed her eyes, trembling. What do we do? He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. We leave. We get far from here. Far from the packs. Before they use this place to tear us apart. But the moment his fingers touched her skin, the stone circle lit up, every rune blazing in unison. Avery gasped. Kale staggered back, and then the wind roared. A pillar of silver light burst from the center of the altar, swirling around Avery like a storm. Her body lifted inches from the ground, hair whipping around her face, her skin glowing with the same symbols carved into the stones. She heard a voice, not hers, not Kale's, a voice from the circle. The blood of the betrayed, the bond of the fated. The path has been chosen. Kale reached for her. Avery. And then it stopped. The light vanished. The runes dimmed. Avery dropped to the ground, gasping, clutching her chest. Kale knelt beside her, eyes wide with fear. You're bound, he whispered. To me, to the curse, to this place. She looked at him, something ancient stirring behind her eyes. No, she said softly. I'm bound to break it. Moonbound hunters, the forest had never felt so alive and so deadly. Kale paced the narrow perimeter of the makeshift camp they'd set up just beyond the stone circle's reach. His senses were stretched to the edge, tuned into every crackling twig, every faint scent on the wind. The moon was nearly full. Its light filtered through the treetops like silver claws, scratching at the shadows. Avery sat nearby, a worn blanket draped over her shoulders. She hadn't spoken much since the runes had marked her, not out loud, anyway. Her eyes looked distant, like she was listening to something only she could hear. The circle changed you, Kale finally said, breaking the silence. It marked your soul. You can feel them, can't you? Avery nodded slowly. I don't just feel them. I know them. The hunters. They're coming. They've already crossed into this forest. Kale cursed under his breath. They move faster than I thought. The packs? No, he said grimly. Worse. These are moonbound. Rogues enhanced by the old blood, twisted by dark rites and feral loyalty. They hunt anything the elders deem a threat. Like you, she said quietly. Like us, Kale corrected. Because of our bond, they'll see you as corrupted, tainted by the same curse they fear in me. Avery pulled the blanket tighter. How do we fight something like that? We don't, he replied. Not directly. Not unless we want to die tonight. She rose to her feet, her jaw tight. We're not running again, Kale. I'm done hiding. My sister didn't become part of that circle just so I could spend my life in the shadows. Kale stared at her, something fierce and proud flickering in his eyes. You've changed. You said it yourself, she replied, stepping closer. I'm not just human anymore. They both turned suddenly, Kale's head snapping toward the east. A low growl rumbled from his throat. They're here. From the trees, figures emerged, tall, lean, and cloaked in blackened furs. Their eyes glowed in unnatural amber, their movements too fluid to be human, too precise to be beast. Some were half-shifted already, claws extended, teeth bared. T their center stood a woman in silver armor, her hair braided with bones. Her voice carried like a cold wind. Kale of the cursed blood, she said. You are summoned before the High Fang. Surrender, and the girl may yet live. Kale stepped forward, shifting partially, his eyes glowing blue, his muscles tensing. Beneath his shirt, you'll have to drag me through the flames before I give her to you. The moonbound commander tilted her head. Then so be it. Without warning, the hunters charged. Kale launched himself at the nearest attacker, shifting mid-leap into his wolf form, a massive black beast with streaks of silver. He collided with the rogue, fangs sinking deep into its shoulder. Another leapt from behind, claws aimed for Kale's flank, but Avery raised her hand instinctively, and a burst of light exploded from her palm. The hunter shrieked, veering off midair. Avery staggered. What the hell was that? Kale growled in approval as he slammed another attacker into a tree. You're drawing power from the bond, but I don't know how to control it. Then feel it, he shouted, spinning and snapping his jaws at a rogue trying to flank her. Stop thinking like a human. Trust your instincts. Another moonbound leapt at her. Avery stepped back instinctively, but this time the glow from her chest intensified. The circle's runes shimmered faintly on her skin. She held her ground, and when the rogue was inches from her, the air around her shimmered like a shield. The attacker bounced off with a snarl and hit the ground hard. Kale shifted back to his human form, breathing hard. Blood streaked down his temple. We need to fall back. The woods won't protect us forever. No, Avery said, voice steel. We fight here. This is where it started. Suddenly, the wind howled low and mournful. The moonbound froze, their heads lifting in alarm. Even Kale stilled. What is that? Avery whispered. Kale's eyes widened. The spirit of the Luna Stone. The altar is awakening. From the ruins behind them, mist rolled out in tendrils. The earth trembled faintly. The runes on the stones began to glow again, brighter than before. One of the moonbound screamed, backing away. She's merged. The Luna has chosen her. The commander snarled. She's no Luna, just a human girl wearing sacred power. But even her voice held uncertainty now. Kale grabbed Avery's wrist, pulling her toward the altar. If you can feel it, connect with it. Let the stone amplify your bond. It's the only way to break their link to the curse. What happens if I can't? Kale met her gaze, his hand tightening. Then I'll die fighting beside you. Avery nodded once and stepped onto the altar. The ground trembled. Light surged beneath her feet, rushing up her body in glowing arcs. The runes ignited across her skin, spreading like tattoos, alive and shifting. Her hair whipped back as the wind rose into a howl of ancient voices. The moonbound staggered, their forms flickering, unstable. The commander screamed, "Stop her!" But it was too late. Avery lifted her arms and the altar pulsed once, then exploded with silver light. The wave washed over the forest, hitting the hunters like a tidal wave. They screamed, some collapsing, others retreating into the trees, their forms breaking apart as the magic severed their tether to the curse. Cale shielded his eyes. When the light faded, only he and Avery remained in the clearing. She stood at the center, swaying. The runes on her skin faded slowly, leaving faint silver scars. Cale rushed to her, catching her before she fell. Avery, are you all right? She opened her eyes slowly. I felt them, all of them. Not just the hunters, but the wolves. The Luna before me, my sister. Cale held her tight. What did they say? Her voice was faint, but certain. That this is only the beginning. Betrayal, or sacrifice. The days after the attack passed in a haze of broken silence and low burning tension. Avery hadn't been the same since the altar woke. She moved like someone carrying something far heavier than her own body. Even when she wasn't speaking, Cale could feel the hum of energy that clung to her skin, the way her presence pulled at his wolf like the moon herself. But that wasn't what worried him. It was the way she looked at him now. Not with fear, not even anger, with distance. They camped near an old glen marked by crescent-shaped stones, an ancient boundary warded by old pack laws. The moonbound had retreated, but not vanished. They lingered, watching. Cale tossed another log onto the fire and glanced at Avery, who sat on a fallen log, eyes on the distant mist. She'd barely spoken since the altar. She hadn't asked about the bond, or the pain in his side from the fight, or even the next steps. Avery, Cale said softly. She didn't answer. He stood, walking closer. You haven't slept in days. Still nothing. Cale crouched beside her, voice gentler. What did the altar show you? She turned finally, and what he saw in her eyes chilled him more than the moonbound ever could. Resolve and sorrow. I saw my sister, she said. She didn't die, Cale. She became something. She gave herself to the Luna to protect the pack, and I think I'm walking that same path now. Cale's breath caught. Avery, I also saw you, she interrupted. You were there when my father was killed, weren't you? The words hit him like a blade. He didn't flinch. He didn't deny. I was, he said quietly. But it wasn't what you think. She stood, arms wrapped around herself. Then tell me, before I decide if I can still trust you. Cale rose slowly. He wasn't meant to die. The elders ordered me to threaten him to send a message. He knew about us, about what we are. The packs were afraid he'd expose the truth. Avery's voice cracked. So you were their assassin. I was their prisoner. Cale shouted. I was raised in chains, trained to kill on command, bound by blood oath to a council that saw me as nothing but a weapon. I broke free the night I met you. That was the first night I chose something for myself. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. I've been carrying this anger for so long, she said. All of it pointed at you. And now I don't know who to be without it. You don't have to choose now, Cale said. But know this, I wouldn't do it if I could. Every second of it. I didn't know your name, your face, just a mission. But I've known your soul since the first time you touched me. That wasn't fate. That was truth. Avery looked away. I don't know if I can forgive you. He stepped closer. Then, don't hate me, tear me apart, but don't walk into what's coming alone. The Luna didn't choose you to die for them. Maybe that's what it'll take, she whispered. No, Cale said, voice shaking. I won't let you sacrifice yourself. She faced him now, angry and glowing faintly with power. You don't get to decide that. You don't get to decide anything for me anymore. Lightning flickered behind her. The bond between them pulsed hot in Cale's chest, but it didn't feel warm. It felt like fire tearing through raw flesh. She was pushing him away, severing the bond. No, he said, stepping back. Avery, stop. You don't know what happens if I do, she said. I saw it. One of us has to fall, or the hunters won't stop. She closed her eyes, focusing. Her hands were trembling. The marks on her skin lit again. Cale grabbed her wrists. Don't do this. If I sever the bond, the curse ends. They'll stop hunting you. You can run. And leave you to burn? Never. His voice was raw, desperate. I'd rather die beside you than live without you. Her hands dropped, weak. I don't know how to choose between my heart and the world, she whispered. Cale pulled her into him. Then don't choose us. If fate made this bond, maybe fate's not our enemy. In the distance, the wolves howled. The moonbound were closing in again. Avery looked up at him. Then we'll need more than hope. We need allies. Cale nodded. Then let's go where none of them would dare follow. Where? To the ruins of the Hollow Pact, he said. Where the original curse began. Avery stepped back. her voice breaking but stronger than before. Then we ended at the root. As they packed and prepared to leave, neither spoke. But something had shifted, not healed, not yet, but no longer broken. Emotional break through the forest deepened as they passed into lands untouched by time. The trees here weren't just old, they were sacred. Their trunks twisted like reaching arms, bark blackened by ancient fire and moonlight. The hollow packed ruins loomed ahead, buried in mist and silence, where even the birds dared not sing. Avery moved beside Kale, silent, every step carrying both dread and purpose. Here, the curse had been born. Here, the first Alpha Luna had bound the Moonblood wolves to darkness. And here, they would find whatever truth still remained. Are you sure? She whispered, her fingers brushing the edge of the stone archway. This place, it feels like, it remembers pain. Kale nodded, voice low. Because it does. This is where my bloodline was made into monsters. They passed beneath the arch. As soon as they stepped inside the stone perimeter, a wind whipped through, cold and sharp, carrying old whispers, cries from generations gone. Avery paused, her heart thudding hard in her chest. Do you feel that? Kale closed his eyes. Yes, the spirits here, they're not resting. They moved deeper. What remained of the ruins was little more than broken columns and a crumbled daze. But carved into the earth itself were ancient symbols, pulsing faintly. They glowed under Avery's steps, reacting to her presence. I think I'm being called, she murmured. Kale stood behind her. You're a Luna-born, Avery. Your blood carries her echo. Suddenly, her knees buckled. Kale caught her just before she hit the stone. Her eyes rolled back, her lips parted. A vision seized her. She stood in a silver-lit grove. The original Luna stood before her, tall, celestial, with eyes like eternity. Her voice echoed in Avery's. Soul, daughter of dusk, why have you come? Avery's voice trembled. To end the hunt. To break the bond of blood and war. And will you pay the price? Every curse has a cost. I'll pay it. I can't lose him. Then show me your truth. The Luna stepped forward, pressing a glowing hand over Avery's chest. Suddenly, Avery's soul laid bare every wound, every memory, every ache. The night her father died, the years of running, the slow, painful blooming of her love for Kale, even through rage and betrayal. I hated him, she whispered. I wanted him to suffer, but I love him more than I hate what he did. Then the bond is true. The light burst. Avery gasped as she came to, tears streaming down her face. Kale was holding her like she might shatter. Avery, his voice cracked. Talk to me. She touched his cheek. I saw her. The Luna. She showed me myself. He cupped her face. And I've been hiding behind grief, she said, sobbing. But all this time, my heart wasn't broken. It was just waiting for you. Kale's throat worked, struggling to speak, his hands shaking as he held her. I don't deserve your love. No, she whispered. You don't. But I choose to give it. And then she kissed him. Not out of desperation, or pain, or confusion, but out of clarity. This kiss wasn't about claiming or submitting. It was the meeting of two battered souls, finally stepping into the same light. Fire bloomed in her chest, not painful now, but warm, complete. The bond surged, and Kale really felt it for the first time. Not just a connection forged in fate, but in choice. The ruins around them shimmered, and a howl rose, not of threat, but release. They know. Kale said against her lips. The moonbound feel it. They'll come, she said. Let them. They stood, hands clasped, no longer to broken things trying to survive, but a single force rising to rewrite destiny. I'm not afraid anymore, Avery whispered. Not of you, not of this bond. Kale's voice trembled. Then let's burn the curse down together. As they turned to face the rising storm beyond the trees, the hollow pact pulsed once like a heartbeat. Something ancient had awakened, and this time, it was on their side. Love reveled. The moon hung low and swollen above the treetops, casting silver fire across the land as if the sky itself were watching. Holding its breath, Avery stood at the edge of Kale's territory, her heart pounding. She had returned with him to the heart of the moonbound pack, not as a prisoner, not as prey, but as his mate. The whispers had already begun among the pack, a human, a Luna marked outsider, the daughter of the man he killed, but none of them mattered to her now, because tonight, everything would be decided not with a fight, but with truth. Inside Kale's cabin, silence stretched like a held breath. A fire crackled in the hearth. Shadows danced over the carved stone walls and animal pelts. but it was the quiet between them that shimmered with tension. Avery stood at the window, fingers pressed to the cool glass, watching the woods. Cale moved behind her slowly, cautious not with fear, but reverence. Like if he stepped too loudly, he might shatter something sacred between them. You don't have to stay, he said softly. If this gets worse, if the pack doesn't accept you, she turned, facing him. Cale, you don't get to protect me from this. Not anymore. He looked at her for a long moment, and something in his chest cracked wide open. I almost killed the one thing I was destined for, he said, voice raw. But the moment I saw you fight through your pain, when you stood between me and your revenge, I knew you weren't just my mate, you were my redemption. Avery's voice wavered. You think I'm your salvation, Cale, but I'm broken too. I've lived with nothing but hatred in my veins for years. But not anymore, he said, stepping closer. You loved me through it, and his voice dropped to a whisper. I never stopped dreaming of you. Even when I didn't know your name, you haunted me. She closed the distance between them. Her fingers grazed his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart. I don't want a love that's built on fate alone, she said. I want one we choose every day. Cale nodded, voice barely holding. Then choose me now. Avery stood on her toes, brushing her lips to his. Not a kiss of desperation, but of answer. He inhaled sharply like her touch had lit his soul on fire. And when he kissed her back, it was with years of ache, regret, desire, and need pouring through. Their bodies met like they'd always belonged. Clothes were shed without shame or hesitation. There was nothing between them now, no past, no pain, just the raw and aching truth of who they were. Cale's touch was reverent, tracing her skin like sacred ground. And Avery, once so guarded, let herself melt under him, not as prey, not as victim, but as his equal. I love you, she whispered against his throat, her voice catching as his hands settled on her hips. He stilled, his breath shallow. Say it again. She leaned in, her lips brushing his ear. I love you. And in that moment, his wolf surged forward, not in dominance, but in surrender. The bond ignited, not just the silver thread that marked them as mates, but the spiritual, emotional bond that tethered them at the soul. Cale's body shuddered as it took hold. Avery felt it too, like moonlight stitched through her veins. A pressure behind her eyes, a deep hum in her chest. They were connected now fully. Every beat of his heart echoed in hers. Every joy, every scar, every vow. When they came together again, their union wasn't just passion, it was healing. Avery gasped as waves of heat and clarity passed through her. For the first time in her life, she felt whole, not fixed, but accepted. Cale buried his face in her neck, his voice a broken vow. You're my Luna, my mate, my home. Tears slipped from her eyes. And you're my choice. After, they lay wrapped in the glow of the firelight and bondlight alike. Cale gently traced the new mark on her shoulder, an intricate crescent scar, delicate as a whisper. The Luna's blessing. She marked you, he murmured. She marked us, Avery corrected. A wolf howled in the distance, long and solemn. Cale's body stiffened. The elders, they've called for us. Avery sat up, her hand already in his. Then we go, together. He turned to her, still heavy in his gaze. You're not afraid anymore. I am, she said honestly. But love doesn't wait for fear to leave. It just chooses anyway. Cale pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. I will fight every tradition, every enemy, every curse for you. And I'll stand with you, she said. Through the fire and the moon, outside, the wind carried their promise through the pines. Together, they stepped into the dark woods, no longer haunted, no longer hiding. They were mates now, and their love had been revealed not as a destiny they stumbled into, but as a bond they forged from broken pieces. The final challenge awaited, but for the first time, they'd face it as one. Final challenge's scent of pine and frost lingered in the still air as Avery and Cale approached the sacred gathering grounds. A ring of ancient stones towered in a moonlit clearing, worn by time and soaked with the history of every alpha that had ever bled, shifted, or ruled. Tonight, the ground would judge again. Avery could feel it in her bones, something old and powerful, humming beneath her feet. Cale's hand tightened around hers, his golden eyes scanning the crowd that waited. The moonbound pack was assembled in a half-circle, elders cloaked in black furs, warriors lined with ceremonial paint, and wolves crouched low in their animal forms, muscles tensed. Tension hung like a storm cloud above them all. Cale stepped forward, chin high, the alpha in him rising as naturally as breath. I present my Luna, he announced, his voice carrying through the clearing like thunder. She carries my mark. She carries my heart. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Avery lifted her chin, refusing to flinch beneath their scrutiny. Elder Marek stepped forward, his silver beard braided with bones, his eyes sharp as ice. She is human, he said, his voice rough with disdain. You bring a human into the sacred bond? Into our bloodline? She is more than human, Kale growled. She faced her enemy and chose mercy. She bears the Luna mark. The moon chose her. Marek turned to Avery, his gaze piercing. Do you understand what it means to walk beside an alpha? To share the pain of the bond? To carry the fury of a pack that is not your own? I do, she answered. I've bled for him. I've stood in the fire of betrayal. And I'm still here. I didn't come to ask for permission. I came to claim what's already mine. The crowd murmured. Marek's jaw tightened. Then prove it. With a sharp motion, he drew a dagger from his cloak and drove it into the earth. Blood answers blood. Tradition demands the trial of devotion. Kale's body went rigid. No, she must face it, Marek said. Alone. The forest will test her. If she returns alive, we will accept her. Kale turned to Avery, shaking his head. This trial, it's not just a test. It's a curse. Wolves have died out there. I've walked through worse, she said gently. I'll come back to you. Before he could protest again, she pressed her lips to his, one last kiss. Then she turned and walked into the woods. The forest was alive, not with wildlife, but with something older, a magic that shimmered in the mist, that pulled at her thoughts and memories. The trees seemed to whisper her name, warping reality. Avery moved forward, clutching the blade Marek had given her. The first trial came in the form of a shadow, a phantom of her father. He stepped from between the trees, eyes hollow, voice heavy. You love the man who killed me. Her knees almost buckled. You're not real, but your guilt is, the phantom rasped. You betrayed my memory. She clenched the dagger. You were hunting him. You tried to kill an innocent boy. You made me carry your hate. The image of her father screamed and shattered into mist. She kept walking. The second trial came with pain. A trap snapped around her ankle, iron, sharp, ancient. She screamed, falling to the ground, blood-soaked. The leaves, but as the mist closed in, the pain dulled, numbed by something darker. A voice whispered, give up. Rest here. It's warmer if you surrender. She remembered Kale's touch, his promise. I'm not done yet, she hissed. With trembling fingers, she forced the trap open, screaming through the agony, crawling forward until her foot hit solid earth again. The mist receded. The final trial came at a cliff's edge. Below, darkness. A fall that would break every bone. Ahead, a narrow path of moonlight that stretched over nothing. A test of faith. Avery stood at the ledge, bleeding and bruised, the blade shaking in her hands. I trust him, she whispered, and she stepped forward. The light held. Step by step, she crossed the impossible void. When she reached the other side, the moon broke through the clouds and bathed her in silver. The forest sighed. The trial was over. Back at the circle of stones, Kale paced like a caged beast. His wolf snarled beneath his skin. It had been hours. The elders were already murmuring about failure. Then, a hush fell. Avery emerged from the trees limping, bloodied, but unbroken. Gasps echoed. Kale ran to her, catching her as she collapsed into his arms. She passed, Elder Marek said, voice low. The forest has accepted her. Kale growled, his voice thick with tears. I accepted her long ago. A chorus of howls erupted from the wolves around them. One by one, the pack lowered their heads. Avery, eyes heavy, looked up at Kale. Did we win? He brushed her hair back. We're just beginning. Avery stood at the edge of the clearing, the first rays of dawn breaking through the trees like golden ribbons. The air was fresh with pine and moon-kissed dew, and for the first time in what felt like forever, her chest rose without pain. She was no longer just a girl with a shattered past. She was Kale's Luna, and the forest had acknowledged it. Kale appeared beside her silently, his arms slipping around her waist, grounding her. His touch was gentle now, not the fierce grip of the alpha, but the tender hold of a man who had nearly lost everything and clung to the one thing he never expected to find. You didn't have to come back, he said quietly, pressing his forehead to hers. She let out a soft laugh, one that trembled at the edges. I told you I would. I would have burned the forest to the ground if it kept you. You don't have to. I walked through it. I faced it all. Her hand rose to his cheek, thumb brushing over a faint scar. And I still chose you. Kale looked like he might fall to his knees from the weight of that truth. Instead, he leaned in and kissed her deep, reverent, slow, a claiming yes, but also a surrender. When they broke apart, the pack had begun to gather again. This time, there were no snarls or judging eyes, only curiosity. And something softer respect. Marek approached, the weight of years showing in his somber expression. She carries the Luna mark, survived the trial, and bears no malice for the blood in our past, he said. It's time the moonbound accepted what fate has already decided. One by one, wolves bowed their heads to her. Kale's wolf surfaced in his golden eyes, and his voice rolled over the pack like distant thunder. This is your Luna, mine by fate, ours by bond. The howls that followed were deafening. That night, the pack celebrated in the old ways. Fires lit high, the moon above full and watchful. Drums beat in rhythm with hearts. Meat roasted over open flame. Laughter returned to a place long burdened by silence. Avery sat beside Kale, wrapped in a cloak lined with wolf fur. Her ankles still throbbed from the trial, but she bore it proudly. Pain had shaped her. It had not defined her. A young pup with wide eyes approached her, hesitated, then placed a carved pendant in her lap. It's for you, he said. Mama said every Luna needs something from the pack. Avery smiled, touched by the gesture. Thank you. What does it mean? It's protection. For the heart. Her smile wavered, but only because it struck so deeply. Kale watched her with quiet awe. She had stepped into his world with no map, no training, and had become more than he'd ever hoped for. He reached out, twining their fingers. You were never meant to be just human, he said. You were meant to lead with me. And you were never just a killer, she whispered. You were just surviving until I found you. His thumb ran over the edge of her mating mark, now healed, warm against her skin. They didn't need to speak the rest. Later that night, when the fires had burned low and the pack slumbered in their dens and hollows, Kale took Avery deep into the woods far beyond the circles and rituals. They came to a stream, moonlight dancing along the surface like silver silk. It was quiet, safe, sacred. This is where I first shifted, he said, where I first tasted blood, and where I first prayed never to hurt anyone again. Avery looked at him, heart aching for the boy he'd been. And now I understand. The moon doesn't curse us. It calls us to balance, to choose. He turned to her, cupping her face. I choose you, Avery. Over pain, over revenge, over the laws of my kind. I choose love. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the unbearable beauty of being seen. I choose you too, Kale. Not because fate said so, but because I do. He kissed her under the moon's blessing. Soft, fierce, eternal. Weeks later, Avery stood at the edge of the forest, looking back at the cabin they now called home. A new garden bloomed under her care. The windows shone with light. The pack visited often, bringing food, stories, questions. She was learning, leading, healing. She still had dreams of her father sometimes. But now, in those dreams, he smiled. Kale came up behind her, arms slipping around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. Thinking of leaving? He teased. Never. She whispered, and she meant it.